Hello and welcome to Abilities United Presents Community Connections, a program dedicated to those individuals living with a developmental or physical challenge. I'm Andrea Throndson, Community Connections Developer. Tonight we are talking about empowerment. How can we empower our community and the world with our individual and collective actions? We'll also be showing a video created by our Abilities United participants. Our guest is City Councilman Greg Scharff, who just concluded his term as Mayor of Palo Alto for 2017. Welcome, Greg.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew.
Yeah. So we're going to get into some hot topics a little bit later, but let's start with what got you interested? Tell me a little bit about your background, how you got involved in City Council, and so forth.
Well, I first ran for City Council in 2009. If you remember, it was really just after the Great Depression started. Not Great Depression, Great Recession.
Great Recession, right.
You know, downtown was actually having trouble. There was big vacancies. Our infrastructure was really poor. People continue to complain to me about the road quality and all of that. So I actually ran for City Council because I wanted to fix our budget, I wanted to fix our infrastructure, and I wanted to fix our business climate downtown.
Wow. So how, because your background is in law, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How did you, what was that like for you to be interested in, you know, pursuing the law and your practice and so forth, and then you had an interest in the city as well? Did that come from your background in law, or did the two not?
Well, in many ways, you know, understanding law is the perfect thing to be on the City Council, because we pass legislation. We really have, you know, different roles. Primarily, it's a legislative function where you pass laws. I mean, that's really what you're doing. And so to be able to understand it, read it, understand the policy, it's really a legal background is very, very helpful.
Right. So you had the foundation then.
Yes.
You had the foundation of knowledge and facts and knowing what you were doing so that you could go in then as a city councilman and hopefully really make some change.
Yes.
And what was that like back then in 2009?
Oh, it was very exciting. You know, it was very exciting to be first elected to the City Council, and it's all new, and you know, it's sort of like drinking from a fire hose, because you learn so much so quickly.
Yeah.
And you know, it's really not what you expect, because your view of the City Council, your view of local government is informed by, you know, being on the outside. And once you're on the inside, you see things very differently.
Wow. How would 2009 compare to 2017?
So we have the opposite issues. So in 2009, you know, foreclosures were rampant, right? Not necessarily in Palo Alto, but throughout the Bay Area. You know, we had the mortgage crisis, we had the economy, you know, unemployment was very high.
Right.
Traffic was not an issue.
Right.
If you remember, it really wasn't. No one talked to me about traffic.
No.
No one talked to me about parking.
Right.
You could get a restaurant reservation whenever you wanted.
Right.
You know, now we have the opposite. There's a huge shortage of parking. Traffic is a problem. People are upset about all sorts of things that are basically we're the victims of our own success. The economy has bounded back so strongly, and now we have a housing shortage, which is a real issue.
Exactly, and that brings us to our big topic but it's so interesting that you give us that background. So in 2009, we were in housing foreclosure, unemployment, recession, depression, all of that, and so we didn't have any of these congestion, housing, you know, it was not like it is today. Fast forward 8-9 years, and here we're sitting with one of the biggest housing crises. And, you know, I know that Abilities United, we've had to lose staff because they can't afford to live in Palo Alto, you know, and now we have so many people that want to be here because we have a booming economy. We have, you know, a lot of things that are, you know, very desirable, but we have this housing crisis.
And, you know, the other thing people forget is back then, we cut $20-some million out of our city budget. And that's really what we were talking about in 2010. We were talking about how do we continue to provide the services to the residents of Palo Alto while cutting $20 million out of the budget. And those were really interesting discussions. They were discussions about, you know, how much of a traffic team do we cut? Do we cut the library hours? Do we cut, you know, it was all about that. And that was a really interesting time to figure out how you navigate that and, you know, not impact the quality of people's lives in Palo Alto.
What were the ramifications of such a big cut in the budget for today?
Well, I mean, I think we became stronger because of it, because we basically streamlined out. You know, people talk about cutting the fat in government,
Right.
and I think that's really what we did. You know, I don't think services suffered. We've put back some of the stuff. So I mean, I would say there were some cuts to services, but on the whole, I think we actually navigated it really well. And now we basically do more with less people. We actually have less people working in Palo Alto than we did in 2007, for instance.
Wow, very, very interesting. And I'm so glad that you gave us the foundation of, because we'll sit in meetings and we'll talk about, at Abilities United, we've got so many participants that want housing. We've got staff that wants housing, and there's, not enough housing. But to understand that that came from our own success in Palo Alto.
Right.
So when you take it from that framework, you have a little bit of softness about it rather than this harsh, nobody can afford to live in Palo Alto. And it takes it to we've just got a problem, how do we fix it? And I know that that was a lot of what your platform, last year when you were mayor and, going forward is we're aware of the problem, how can we resolve it?
Exactly.
And so forth. What, as mayor last year, what are just a couple of the highlights?
Oh, the highlights of being mayor in general?
Yeah.
Oh, I think from a personal point of view, the highlight would be going to Heidelberg and signing our sister city relationship with the mayor of Heidelberg, and then they came here as well.
Right.
And I'd started that process in 2013.
Wow.
So when we first signed our smart city partnership. So to see it from mayor in 2013 to come to fruition in mayor of 2017. And you got to remember, Heidelberg's been there for 1,000 years, and
Right.
they have a castle on the hill and all of that. So when you go, they have 49 or 47 city council members. I forget the exact number. So it's more like a mini parliament when you sit down with the mayor there and sign in front of everything. So it was a nice experience.
Well, and that's one of the benefits of our communities today is that technology is allowing us to do so much internationally. At Abilities United, we're starting some partnerships with other countries as well, and just to get that breadth of knowledge and experience. So it sounds like that was a
So
highlight.
from a policy perspective in that, I'd say the highlights were, one is we saved Buena Vista Mobile Home Park. I think that was a really fantastic achievement.
Right.
Because that had been, percolating and going through it for many years, where the people that lived there had been under threat of losing their homes and losing their community and all of that. So that felt really good. And then we finished with our comprehensive plan, which is really the blueprint for how much housing we're going to build, how many jobs we're going to have, and what Palo Alto is going to look like in the next, 15 years.
Yeah. So I was doing a little bit of reading about what has happened over the years and and maybe I could be totally wrong. Again, I'm kind of a novice at this, but it seems what is the need versus capacity? What is, how do you differentiate between that? How do you know what the need is and how you're going to work towards fill that? Is that something that you're familiar with? I mean,
Well, I think the need really, at the moment, seems to almost be unlimited.
Okay.
I don't think anyone thinks that we can build enough housing in Palo Alto to solve the problem. The issue is, can we build enough housing regionally?
Okay, right.
And, I give you an example is Mountain View is building more than 10,000 units. Sunnyvale is planning on building more than 10,000 units. Redwood City has built 2,000 to 3,000 units. You can drive by Redwood City and see all those new housing units. So a lot of Bay Area cities are building housing. I think Palo Alto in the same period has built like 150 units. I mean, so it's dramatically different.
Right, right.
So, I don't think there's any sense at all in Palo Alto that we are leading the way on this.
Right, going to solve the issue. What if we get into the area of, because, the elephant in the room is the affordability and the, the houses that we have in Palo Alto and then needing some lower income housing. What is the dialogue about that? What is just in the city council, where does that all stand?
Well, I think there's a strong belief among most council members that we need more housing. And I think the comprehensive plan that we just shows that, we've been building less than 100 units a year. And the new comprehensive plan tells us we should build at least 250 units a year. Now,
So a double increase.
Right.
Wow.
Now, a lot of council members think we should build far more than that. And I think there are some council members that think we should build less.
Sure.
But I think that was a reasonable compromise and what's possibly realistic. You know, I think it's good to be aspirational, but you want your aspirations to have some basis in reality.
Right, right. Well, and again, you want that so that your messaging to the community can be consistent with the realities. I just taught a class on when your expectations are too high and your reality's down here, then you exist in the zone of never enoughness.
Right.
And I think it's important that as leaders of the community, we have expectations that are a little closer to our reality so that we actually experience some satisfaction.
I agree with you. You put that very well.
Well, thank you. And it's, you know, it's important that we feel that all the populations are being served as well.
Yes.
So I think we very, very definitely agree on that. This is a hot topic. We're going to talk more about it in just a few minutes. But what I would like to do is, last year, our participants at Abilities United partnered up with Stanford University, the Department of Engineering there. And they created, the engineering program there created a project. It was called the Tetris Table. And our Abilities United participants made a video of this awesome project. So I'd like you to see the video and this project that was collaborated with Stanford University. Let's have a look.
Here live at Abilities United in Palo Alto with two of the Stanford students who have developed a creative art tool for people with disabilities. So my first question, guys, is why did you decide to make an art tool for people with disabilities?
We decided to make a art tool for people with disabilities so they can increase their sort of creative independence, so they can have more independence when they're creating art, so they can see a painting or a drawing and they can start coloring it the way they want to in any form or fashion. And we wanted to facilitate that process for them.
My next question is, what materials did you use for creating this tool?
So the materials that we used, we wanted to use materials that were easy to acquire. So something that you could go into your local hardware store and purchase. So currently our prototype consists of pieces of Duron, which is just medium density fiber or wood, as well as your general run-of-the-mill nuts and bolts with a small Lazy Susan bearing, which also could be bought at a hardware store. And the little helping hand mechanism is actually made from pieces of an articulated lamp that we repurposed, which can also be made of just simple beams that you could purchase at a Home Depot or Ace Hardware. And yeah, that's actually it. That's all it's composed of. Our device has two subcomponents. The first is an adjustable easel. So that's mainly meant to hold up the, the paper that you're coloring on or painting on in an orientation that's accessible for that individual. And the second part of this device is the helping hand, which holds up the art tool. So our participants don't have to worry about holding it upright, and they just have to worry about moving it in the plane of the piece of paper that they're coloring on.
Why do you like working with these participants on the artwork that they do?
What we've been doing in the past is hand over hand.
Yes.
And the hand over hand is pretty much just that. Well, devices that the students came up with takes that. So it's more of an independence for them. They most certainly get a sense of achievement, just like I do or you would, so it's good to see the achievement of what Abilities United most certainly brings together. But the students from Stanford, the engineering department, the art department, kudos to you guys. Yeah, I mean, how could somebody not be taken by that?
So I get so inspired. Our participants, they did the interviewing. they were filming that segment. They worked with the Stanford students on how to present that. And I can't express, the students at Stanford from the engineering department, their names are all in the credits, and they were so wonderful with our participants. And that Tetris table allows our participants to, as he was saying, they used to do hand over hand, and now they've got the freedom. So that project really revolutionized the art that some of our participants are able to do. And, you know, it's things like that, that people coming together and developing partnerships and collaborating, it's just how we're working for our whole theme, which is empowerment tonight, and how can we make the community and the world a better place. That's a great example. So anyway, thank you for watching. Now back to our topic about Palo Alto and housing and so forth. So what would you say to, if I was going to go back to some of our families and say who, you know, have their participants, you know, in Abilities United at Palo Alto, what would be the message I would give them about what the future holds for Palo Alto housing?
So I'm glad you asked that. It was really interesting. We were talking about putting granny units, and we basically had a really strict ordinance that made it impossible for most people to build a second unit on their property. And we had a number of people, mothers, frankly, with children, you know, with disabilities, who came forward and said, I need a place that's separate, that people can live near me, and that is the perfect thing we need. And I would say that was one of the strong reasons that we liberalized it. We now have one of the most liberal second unit ordinances. We call them ADU ordinances, but second unit ordinances in the Bay Area. We went from allowing, like, you know, 500 properties in Palo Alto to be able to do this, to virtually every single family home property can now put a second unit on it.
Right. And that's brilliant, because what that allows is it addresses the needs of the different populations. I mean, in my brain, I can think of that would be ideal for some of our families who their adult, you know, needs an independent place to live, but they still need, you know, some support. You think of that could be an elderly situation where you've got an elderly parent who wants their independence contained, but also still needs some support. You can do the, you know, this is the Bay Area, how many people are in their 20s and 30s and still needing some support from home because of the economy as such. And it seems like that is, you know, a brilliant suggestion that would hit a lot of pocket of need.
You know, I totally think it is, and a lot of other cities are moving in that direction too, because it allows, you know, if you build new apartment complexes, which I absolutely think we need to do, but most of the rents on the newest apartment complexes are fairly high, and so you hope what they do is they draw people out of older ones, which then lowers the rents overall or lowers the rate of growth of rent. But on building second units, you know, a lot of people, they don't manage to the highest rent. They like the person, or as you said, they have family members, and it does a whole host of needs, and it's not just the upper end.
Right, but it also addresses the need to stay community and not high-rise, because there's a charm about Palo Alto, and there's a need that every human being has to be involved in community.
Yes.
And the higher you go up in a building, the lower you feel in the sense of community, because you're isolated. And I think that's where, especially in Silicon Valley, because we work harder, we work faster, we're more isolated, and we've lost some of this sense of family. So if we can bring that back and still address the low-income housing issues, the sense of community, the needs across the table, you know, from different levels of economies and needs and students and workers and elderly, you know, that's when we're working together and empowering our population.
Exactly. No, I totally agree with you.
That's completely hopeful. I didn't know that, so that's really good. So what are other ways that we can all, not just Abilities United participants, but in a whole, you know, the state of the world right now is pretty chaotic. What do you think that we can do on an individual level to be portals of change? How can we, you know, even though it sounds cliche, make the world a better place?
So I was thinking about that actually. It's funny enough before you came, before we did this, and two things came to mind. One is take someone who's the one person who started Ada's Cafe, for instance.
Right.
I don't know if you're familiar with Ada's Cafe.
Of course,
right?
yes, it's wonderful.
And there's now one in San Francisco as well. And I remember when this first came up, Kathleen came to us and said, actually came by my house and said, you know, I have this great idea. At the library in Palo Alto, there's a cafe, there's an RFP to put in a new cafe. It's probably going to be Coupa, but we have this other idea.
Right.
And everyone got behind that because it was such a brilliant idea. And it's been such a resounding success.
Yeah.
Right? And so to answer your question, it's for someone to have a vision and then to execute on that vision. And that's really what she did. And I would say the Magical Bridge Playground, which you're probably also familiar with,
Yes,
fantastic,
yes,
right?
yes,
That was
we've
a
done a video.
visionary project.
Yes.
Right? So it's having a vision. Someone thought to themselves, we don't have this in Palo Alto.
Right.
This could be.
Right.
And I would say that the city council, the city government, is really open to visionary people and how we get that done. When someone has a good idea, that's what we're happy to help. We're happy to make it happen. And that's two examples, I think, that we can be very proud of.
Yeah. Well, and I think that Palo Alto is very forward thinking in that respect. And we've done a video on the Magical Bridge, and Ada's Cafe employs some of our participants. I mean, those are, I mean, brilliant is too small a word.
I agree.
And it took people to create those ideas, but it also took the city to say, we're open. Use our land, you know, use what we've got, and that collaboration between communities and people, and look what came up from that. And look at the possibilities that we can, you know, I always see darkness as a portal for light. And you know, Palo Alto's crowded and it's got issues, but that means it's a fertile ground for growth, you know, and there's so much genius that can come of that if we work together rather than think about what we don't have. And I think that that's something that we can all do.
Well, that was really my message, is that if you have a vision like that and you see something and you have a solution and you come forward with it, the community will rally around you and
Right.
it will likely happen.
Right. And I think that we both agree that that starts on an individual level and can grow into a bigger level. And even if you change one person's course, I mean, even if there was one in-law unit that changed how a family was able to live in the Bay Area, you know, that's forward movement.
It is.
That's definitely forward movement. So you must get very energized by being on the city council. And
I do. I love being on the city council. I find it the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life.
yeah, what give me two things that we've talked about inspiration. What other kind of change would you like to see in Palo Alto?
What kind of change in
Yeah,
terms of
Just
anything? Or?
in terms of, if you could think of beyond the housing issue, and what is, like, let's take jobs. What do you kind of foresee? How could we move forward in that respect?
Well, I think we actually have more jobs than we have to worry about at the moment. I mean,
Okay.
I think there's so many jobs in Palo Alto, frankly. The discussion is more around, do we need more jobs?
Okay.
That it's really the
Interesting.
opposite discussion than most cities. Things I want to see happen, frankly, are, you know, we've been working on infrastructure improvements for 8 years.
Right.
We're going to build the bike bridge over 101. That's
Right.
finally going to come to fruition.
Okay.
It's, you know, it's making things like that happen. When I was elected to the city council, and it's a little too wonky, but there's a thing called a PCI index on your roads. We were not way down there, but somewhere in the 60s when I was elected to the city council, and people complained about the state of our roads. We now have the best roads in Santa Clara County.
Wow.
For me, that feels good. We filled the potholes. I mean, I
Right.
think that's the basic function of government.
Right.
You know, for 30 years now, we've been trying to build a public safety building.
Right. Okay.
And I think finally this is going to come to fruition.
Wow.
We're moved further along that than anybody else.
Yeah. Well, and I think you brought up such a great point because, you know, I needed to be reminded of that, of there are a surplus of jobs, and we just have to make sure that those jobs are satisfying the needs of all of our populations. But you hit on another topic we can do part 2 on, which is the traffic.
Right.
The traffic in Palo Alto and the infrastructure that holds that traffic. But it sounds like that going forward, there's a plan, and I know there's some issues around the trains and the congestion and so forth, that we need to become a little less uncongested. And it sounds like there's some real plans in the works that are going to address that.
There is. We've basically started a transportation management agency for downtown. We'll probably expand it throughout the city. And the concept really is to make it easy for people to have alternatives to driving. Because obviously, I don't believe you should punish people. I don't believe in the stick approach. I believe it should be more convenient not to drive.
Right, right.
And that actually gets people out of their cars.
Right. Well, and then you're talking on a bigger level as well, because then we've empowered the world, and we've also helped the environment, which it is an issue. So again, it's solving a problem that has many little tentacles that shoot out. When you solve one problem, then you can hopefully that will grow and take
But
root.
I will say one thing about traffic congestion and jobs. The next recession will solve our problems.
It will. And there is an ebb and flow.
There is.
There's an ebb and flow to everything. And I think that, you know, what we've highlighted here is that life is always going to be life. There's going to be ebbs, there's going to be flow. But it takes power and envisioning and coming together and looking at things honestly and then working collaboratively so that we can, I love that word, empowerment.
I think there's one other thing I'd like to say. You know, we're moving towards $15 for a minimum wage. We're now, this year, I think we're at $13.50. And I think that really makes a big difference in a lot of people's lives.
I think it will too.
You know?
Yeah. The whole economic situation. I think that's
Especially for people with disabilities often, right? Because often it's some of the lower paying jobs.
right. We've had a lot to talk about tonight, and I just want to thank you so much, Greg, for joining us.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
And as you can see, there's a lot that you can do in your community, and we're all working to empower the